Hi, everyone. I'm Sue Montgomery, Rolling Meadows reference librarian. I'm excited to be able to share 3 great reads from our library's history collection, which is extensive, rich, and 100% true. Whether you're an avid reader or a wannabe book hound, we hope these talks will help you discover your own next truly great read. My first 2 books are written through the eyes and ears and senses of the people who experienced historic events as they were unfolding. Dead Wake, The Last Crossing of the Lusitania, is my first gripping, can't-put-it-down tale. Erik Larson is its masterful author. He wrote it in 2015, the 100th anniversary of the sinking of the Lusitania. Welcome aboard. It's May 1915. We're crossing the Atlantic on a huge, beautifully appointed British ocean liner carrying almost 2,000 passengers from New York City to its home port in Liverpool, England. England and all of Britain has been at war for almost a year now, and Germany has declared that the seas around Britain are a war zone. Ships that venture into these waters do so at their own risk. But we aren't worried. Our ship's captain and the Cunard Steamship Company that owns the Lusitania have both assured us that our strong, speedy vessel can easily outpace any enemy sub that would be foolish enough to try to interfere with our voyage. And we believe them. Why not? For the last 100 years, civilian ships have always been out of bounds, even in the midst of major conflict. By all the unwritten rules of modern warfare, civilian vessels, especially state-of-the-art lavish cruise ships like ours, are definitely safe from attack. Our captain didn't tell us that the Germans had sunk 12 Allied vessels just since our ship left its New York dock. The Lusitania entered the most dangerous waters the morning she was scheduled to dock at Liverpool. Author Erik Larson takes us on a fascinating, suspense-filled voyage into the motivations and actions of all sorts of characters, good guys and bad guys alike, the cruise ship's passengers, its captain, the owners of its ship line, and the man who commanded the German submarine that sank their ship. The German for submarine is Unterseeboot, which starts with the letter U and is why we call them U-boats. It takes a special kind of writer to be able to get inside the heads of the key players in a drama that happened so long ago, and to artfully relate those events and those people in a way we can totally relate to. Erik Larson is a master at this. I hope you can check out this or any of his other vivid tales. Dead Wake is actually available here 4 different ways: on CD, in large type, in regular type, and even as an audiobook. My next book is John Hersey's Hiroshima. The United States atomic bombing of Hiroshima is something we all know about, right? World War II came to an end shortly after the pilot of an American B-29 plane dropped an atomic bomb that detonated in the skies directly above the center of the Japanese city on August 6, 1945. It was exactly 8:15 in the morning. The atomic detonation was cataclysmic. The bombing of Hiroshima caused more death than any willful human act in all of history. It wreaked devastation on the city's infrastructure. It's impossible to know the exact number who perished that morning because anyone within a 1-mile radius of detonation who was fully exposed would have been vaporized. It's believed that 60,000 to 80,000 people died instantly, and that the death toll doubled in the next several months. People who lived farther out died more slowly and often endured horrible suffering. But it was war. Lots of horrible deaths were happening daily in all parts of the world. Americans were fairly oblivious. Oblivious, that is, until this article by John Hersey was published in the New Yorker magazine. The article made up the entire contents of the August 1946 issue and ran almost exactly 1 year after the bomb's detonation. A 1-article New Yorker issue had never been published before or since. The article shook America and the entire Western world. It quickly became the first ever viral publication. The New Yorker was sold out within days, and the reprints were sold out even as they reached astronomical prices. In Britain, printing was still rationed due to wartime paper shortages, and Hersey would not allow his book to be shortened. So, instead of printing more copies, the BBC broadcast a reading of it over 4 consecutive nights. And then they read it on the air again a few weeks later. They wanted to ensure the greatest number of Brits possible could either read it or hear it. In Japan, a translation was finally published 3 years after it had been written. Author John Hersey was a World War II correspondent for Time magazine. He had reported from Europe and from Asia throughout the war and was already a Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist when he fell ill on board a ship headed for Japan. He wanted to witness and write about the bomb's effects on Hiroshima's infrastructure. But while en route, he read Thornton Wilder's Our Town, in which a town's friendly residents chat with us about life, though they've long ago passed away. Reading that play totally changed Hersey's plan. He decided to write his article about the bomb through the eyes and ears and senses of 6 Hiroshima survivors, starting with the moment the bomb detonated. The whole magazine article was their recollections, where they were, what they were doing, who they were with, what they saw and heard and felt at 8:15 a.m. on August 6, 1945. All 6 people were about a mile from ground zero the moment their lives and the world changed forever. It was published as a book not too long after. I hope you'll read or maybe reread this riveting work. My final book is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. Yuval Harari thinks different. And after you read Sapiens, you just might start thinking different too. Harari, an Israeli college professor, was teaching human history. His focus, the history of ideas and why humans came to dominate the planet. He says our global supremacy over all the other species happened because humans are the only kind of animals who can flexibly cooperate in very large numbers. Lots of species cooperate to share food, migrate, stay safe, raise their young, and so forth. But only humans create social systems of cooperation that have the power to unite billions of individuals. And equally important, only humans have imagination. Of all the animals on the planet, only humans can create fictional stories. Only humans can create and believe in things that only exist in our minds. These stories are the root of everything that orders human life. Complicated systems like governments, religions, and economics are all just imaginary concepts. You can't pick up and hold governments or religions or economics. Nothing legal, not laws, not corporations, not national boundaries, not even human rights occur in nature. All the boundaries we live by and set up our society by, all the rules that order our politics, our faith, and our economic systems are just stories that great numbers of humans believe are true. They work only because large numbers of people willingly accept them. Imagination and our imaginary stories enable cooperation across towns, countries, and the planet. And though money makes the world go round, at its core, money's value is just a story we all believe in. You can't wear money or eat it or drink it. A dollar bill is just a piece of paper with no objective value. Money only has value because we all believe it does. It's only worth the amount printed on it because we have given it that power. If we all stop believing in its value or in the amount of its value, money stops working. Harari says money is the only story that everybody in the world believes. If I've piqued your interest, pick up a copy of Sapiens. It's a fun dive into Yuval Harari's fascinating ideas. Rolling Meadows Library has Sapiens in all the usual formats, print, audio, and digital. Reserve your own copy tonight or 24/7 any day of the week at rmlib.org. Enjoy. Our next presenter is Wendy.
Thank you, Sue. The first book I will talk about tonight is The Professor and the Madman by Simon Winchester. This tome, whose title sounds like a riff on the end of the Gilligan's Island theme song to me, tells about the friendship between an American surgeon incarcerated in a British insane asylum, and a self-educated Scotsman. The two men collaborated on the creation of the Oxford English Dictionary, a massive undertaking. Taking 70 years to compile, the 12 tombstone-sized volumes comprised the first version of the OED and contained 1,827,306 quotations to help define over 400,000 words. The Professor and the Madman focuses on Dr. William Chester Minor, a 38-year-old resident of the Broadmoor Criminal Lunatic Asylum. Minor, an educated man of considerable means, showed an obsessive and sexually repressed personality from an early age. His mental health spiraled downward after a horrifying series of experiences during the American Civil War, causing delusions that were to plague him for the rest of his life. These torments led to the murder of an innocent man and Minor's eventual incarceration at Broadmoor. Because of the surgeon's status as a well-born, well-educated soldier, the asylum director allowed Minor an additional room to house his extensive collection of books. To feel useful, the American doctor answered a newspaper ad calling for readers to provide quotations to illustrate the histories of word usage. This task of finding literary footprints for the dictionary was Minor's medication and became his therapy, according to the author. Winchester speculates that there is a cruel irony in the fact that today's more compassionate treatment and drug therapy might have removed Minor's symptoms, and the doctor might well have felt disinclined or unable to perform his work on the dictionary. The author compares and contrasts Minor with the OED editor, James Murray. While the two men look similar and both had a passion for literature and words, their backgrounds were vastly different. Murray, a Scotsman of impoverished beginnings, left school at the age of 14 and taught himself 5 languages, as well as history, cartography, botany, geology, astronomy, and archaeology. His lifelong obsession for the OED project included drafting his 11 children as soon as they were literate to sort the myriad slips of paper containing the quotations used to illuminate the definitions. This book starts with a murder and intertwines a brief history of dictionaries in general and the OED in particular with the lives of 2 men. The Herculean effort of compiling a comprehensive compendium of the English language provided common ground from which a friendship grew between the self-made Scotsman and the mad American. In addition to the discourse on dictionaries and the people who love words, the Professor and the Madman touches on social conditions in Victorian and Edwardian England, as well as a brief history of madness and the treatments available during these periods. As a bonus, you will improve your vocabulary since each chapter begins with a definition from the dictionary that foreshadows the contents of the section. If this book whets your appetite regarding dictionaries and the words contained within, you may want to check out Winchester's more comprehensive celebration of the vast, sprawling, wonderfully unwieldy English language and the great dictionary makers in The Meaning of Everything. The library also owns the film based on The Professor and the Madman, starring Sean Penn and Mel Gibson. Another book in our collection with a movie tie-in is Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, a Savannah story. For readers who enjoy true crime travel or travelogues, this book is a wonderful combination of the 2 genres. In the early 1980s, New York-based author John Berendt discovered that a Super Saver airline ticket to Savannah, Georgia, cost the same amount as a meal at a trendy restaurant. For 8 years, Berendt lived on and off in the southern city and got to know its quirky denizens. During this span of time, he had a front row seat to the legal trials, and there were 4, of Jim Williams, a wealthy antiques dealer accused of the shooting death of his volatile, drug-addicted handyman and sometimes lover named Danny Hansford. The first half of the book focuses on the eccentric citizens and gracious architecture of Savannah. In addition to Williams and Hansford, notable characters such as the Lady Chablis, a flamboyant black drag queen, Luther Driggers, the inventor of the flea collar and walker of flies on a string, and Minerva, a voodoo priestess, sashay their way across the pages of the book. Savannah is as much a character in the book as are these colorful inhabitants of the city. The beautiful architecture of the city survived the ravages of the Civil War because a group of citizens met General Sherman outside the town limits and persuaded him to spare Savannah the carnage meted out to Atlanta. Berendt lovingly describes the Spanish moss dripping from the stately trees and intricate wrought iron balconies overlooking the multiple town squares. He even gives life to an atmospheric cemetery of mossy mausoleums. In amongst the tombstones, Berendt interviewed a society doyen at her request over a thermos of martinis. The second portion of the book depicts the Williams trials. The antique dealer takes delight in the fact that he is the only person in Georgia to be tried 4 times for the same crime. From his jail cell, he continues to conduct business, organize a soiree for his mother, and write letters to Architectural Digest. After an anonymous report of prosecutorial misconduct following the first trial, Williams hires a voodoo priestess to put a curse on the prosecutor, as well as expensive criminal lawyers in an effort to prove his innocence. The 4 trials, lively matches between dueling attorneys fought with shifting evidence, serve as both theme and anchor to Berendt's illuminating and captivating combination of travelogue and true crime. This is an engaging read for those who want to experience Savannah's soft and slurring, liquid of vowels, kind to consonants, coastal accent, and its elegant, eccentric way of life overlaid with the high drama of a society murder trial. Unlike the first 2 books I chose, my third offering is not narrative nonfiction. The Madman's Library by Edward Brooke Hitching is more of a lavishly illustrated encyclopedic accounting of bizarre materials, or as the subtitle states, the strangest books, manuscripts, and other literary curiosities from history. Brooke Hitching describes himself as a bibliophile who siphoned funds away from comparative inessentials like food and rent to fill the few shelves of his own with rare and old books. His love of expensive and obscure books is apparent in his selection of materials. The tome starts with books that aren't books, wends its way through literary hoaxes, cryptic books, religious oddities, books of spectacular size, and ends with a list of strange titles. Throughout this loving journey through literary oddities is an abundance of wonderful illustrations from varied works. For example, there is a Tibetan manuscript written in ink made of human blood, Samuel Pepys' diary written in cryptic shorthand, bestiaries of fantastical and sometimes real creatures, as well as numerous literary depictions of the devil, including a letter purportedly written by the demon. This book is a fun read in which you can randomly sample sections that pique your curiosity, peruse segments about wearable literature, or books of unsolved puzzles leading to valuable treasures. You can amaze your friends and family when conversation flags with esoteric tidbits from the Madman's Library, such as some of the bizarre titles found in the book's concluding list. Amuse people with How to Cook Husbands from 1898, or 1907's Moles and Their Meaning, being a modernized and easy guide to the ancient science of divination by the moles of the human body, or Manifold Destiny, the one, the only guide to cooking your car engine, published in 1989, which, by the way, has 3 exclamation points in its title. And now I cede the microphone to Anne.
My first great read for history is Island of the Lost. This harrowing story of shipwreck is truly a page turner, while the ultimate survival of at least some of the shipwrecked crew is not really in doubt. After all, the story did get told. The details of their ordeal keep the reader in thrall. This is narrative nonfiction at its best. In fact, if this had been a novel, you might feel some feats accomplished by the crew are just too incredible to be believed. But mystery writer and nautical historian Joan Druitt has done meticulous research, reading several accounts by different crew members, newspaper articles of the time, and various other sources to draw together this highly readable and suspenseful narrative. This is the story of not just one, but two ships that wreck on the same South Pacific island in the same year. South of New Zealand, Auckland Island is a sub-Antarctic island where winds howl at 60 miles an hour and rain or snow falls 300 days a year. The weather here can change in an instant. It is uninhabited to this day, though there were a few early attempts at colonization, which are also described in this book. In 1864, the Grafton, a schooner with a crew of 5, was thrown against the rocks when one of its anchor lines broke in an immense storm. As the Grafton crew worked together to build a shelter and hunt for food, on the opposite end of the island, another ship, the 25-man Invercold, wrecked. This book compares the similar experiences, but vastly different outcomes of the two survivor groups. After a year and a half, the Grafton crew used what resources they had to build a small vessel and launch a rescue team. The survivors of the Invercold, meanwhile, fell into arguing with no direction or plan. The author shows how the two groups in similar situations approached their misfortune in completely different ways. So if you love a gripping adventure story full of historical detail with lots of nature facts thrown in, check out Island of the Lost. Now I'll take you from one shipwreck to another. But rather than being wrecked as a result of natural disaster, the ship at the center of the last slave ship was set on fire and sunk by its own captain. According to the author of The Last Slave Ship, 20,000 ships were used in nearly 300 years of the global slave trade. Of these, just 13 have ever been found. The Clotilda is the only ship ever located that brought enslaved Africans to America. Journalist Ben Raines made international headlines when he found the remains of the Clotilda in the muddy Mobile, Alabama Delta in 2019. This is the riveting chronicle of that ship's last voyage and what happened to those aboard. By the time Alabama plantation owner Timothy Mayer arranged the Clotilda's voyage in 1860, the Atlantic slave trade had been banned by the US government for 50 years. For most of that time, there was little enforcement, but an 1842 treaty established a British and American naval presence along the coast of West Africa in order to catch slavers. The illegal trade became more hazardous. The Clotilda evaded capture and sailed back to Mobile with 110 people illegally taken from Africa. Once in Alabama, the captives were divided between Mayer and his brothers, and Mayer then burned and scuttled the ship to cover up his crime and escape prosecution. Alongside the account of Mayer's life, the author delves deep into the Clotilda's story in Africa, examining the role played by the brutal slave-capturing kingdom of Dahomey. He then explores the captive's legacy in Africatown, a settlement founded by the Clotilda survivors at the end of the Civil War. Raines draws heavily on two previous works, Historic Sketches of the South, written by Emma Langdon Roche, who conducted extensive interviews with several of the Clotilda victims in 1914, and Zora Neale Hurston's 1927 interviews with Cujo Lewis, the last survivor of the Atlantic slave trade in the US. Hurston's book is called Barracoon, The Story of the Last Black Cargo, and is also in Rolling Meadows Library collection. The Last Slave Ship builds on both of these previous books and expands the history of the Clotilda's descendants into the present day. I highly recommend this gripping and informative investigation into the layers of a traumatic piece of our nation's history. One of the remarkable things about the Clotilda story is the documentation available to help tell the story. But it was the finding of the sunken ship that sparked new interest, the physical evidence. In the words of my next author, attention to material things opens a route to access intangible feelings and desires that can evade the documentary record. In All That She Carried, Taya Miles uses a found object, an embroidered flour sack, to chronicle a riveting history of South Carolina's plantation economy. Ashley's sack is currently displayed in the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. What makes this artifact so evocative is the inscription, embroidered by a descendant of Ashley, Ruth Middleton, in 1921. There's a picture of the sack on the screen. It reads, "My great-grandmother Rose, mother of Ashley, gave her this sack when she was sold at age 9 in South Carolina. It held a tattered dress, 3 handfuls of pecans, a braid of Rose's hair. Told her it'd be filled with my love always. She never saw her again." The hints given on this object, touched by 3 generations of women, provided the author, who is a gifted Harvard historian, with enough information to make them real to the reader. She doesn't let Rose fade into the margins when relaying information found in plantation owners' records, which is the only source of information that can possibly be gleaned for glimpses of Rose. Miles uses the contents as a springboard to discuss the significance of such items as clothing, food, and hair to the enslaved people of the time. She investigates the layers of history surrounding the story of Ashley's sack and draws connections to our present. I was intrigued by the idea that without Ruth's inscription on the sack, there would be no record. Without the record, this history would be lost. In All That She Carried, Miles has created a highly readable, haunting, and informative book. I hope you'll give it a try. And now here's Lauren to tell you what she has found in Great History Reads.
You could look it up, the reference shelf from ancient Babylon to Wikipedia by Jack Lynch. Although Lynch confines his discussions to 50 books, divvied up into pairs to compare and contrast, the breadth of his own volume covers an intriguing array of topics. Nor is the subtitle mere hyperbole. He truly does consider Hammurabi's Code, Ibn Sina's Al-Qanon fi Tib, or Canon of Medicine, the Brothers Grimm's Deutsche Wörterbuch, Grove's Dictionary of Music and Musicians, Emily Post's Etiquette in Society, and yes, Wikipedia. Whether you wish to dip into a topic and come out with more information than anticipated, e.g., a cricket almanac provided the information to accurately date Harold Pinter's letters down to the exact day, or to settle in for a solid meandering read, there's much to enjoy. Should you wish to merely glance through, there's a collection of images on glossy paper with descriptive notes, giving form to some of the books and people discussed. The basalt stone from Babylonian times, the fine lettering and illumination of handmade manuscripts, the copious marginalia in a later copy of Ibn Sina's work. These and others may entice you to venture further. Fun fact, if you read all of the following books, you'll get an overview of history of Great Britain and the United States from 1605 to 1956. How? Sir Thomas Browne lived 1605 to 1682. Mary Delaney lived from 1700 to 1788. Mary Shelley from 1797 to 1851. Edgar Allan Poe from 1809 to 1849, and Louis Bromfield from 1896 to 1956. In Search of Sir Thomas Browne, The Life and Afterlife of the 17th Century's Most Inquiring Mind by Hugh Aldersey Williams. More focused in subject, but no less wide-ranging in topic, Aldersey Williams' writing is quietly impassioned, but not wholly deleterious, a word Browne coined and defined among many. Like Ibn Sina, Brown was both a physician and an autodidact, seeking knowledge both at home and abroad, never ceasing to learn throughout his life and then share it through his writings. The distillation and melding of disparate ideas led to his introduction of so many words that the Oxford English Dictionary ranked Brown 25th among all sources responsible for providing first evidence of a word in English, providing 788, and ranked 70th in the OED's top cited in 2012. Hundreds were his own creations, including now common words like medical, veterinarian, cylindrical, prairie, and electricity. Brown knew at least 6 languages and published in several of them, though his first book was published only after the manuscript circulated to friends, suffered unauthorized and, more galling to him, unedited publication. Curiosity and tolerance were both features of Brown's writing and life, the one a constant and the other likely due to his studies abroad, by the standards of his time, that is. Appropriately, one of his later books, Pseudodoxia Epidemica, also known as Vulgar Errors, focused on challenging the errors and superstitions of his era by debunking them with scholarly citations, reason, and empirical evidence, not chiding, but merely offering greater insight to those who might read it. Aldous E. Williams' considerations of Brown's life and writings meander, touching briefly on a multitude of things, much like the erudite, contradictory figure himself. Linked by place, separated by centuries, it's best for a leisurely read with time to pause and ponder as needed. The Paper Garden, An Artist Begins Her Life's Work at 72, by Molly Peacock. Molly Peacock's examination of Mary Delaney's mixed media collage creations, so detailed and botanically correct that the British Museum holds nearly 1,000 of them, although people now find that there are some things that weren't exact as they wished, offers much illumination on the process and person who brought them into existence. Although Mary Delaney's life to that point had included meeting and conversing with possibly even more illustrious people than Mary Shelley and her circle might have, Delaney's combination of skill, dedication, and determination are equally impressive. Carefully pieced, the author uses the art to examine Mary Delaney's life and art, while also reflecting upon her own with the emotional and linguistic finesse one might expect of a poet. There is art galore within these pages in many forms, and a loving portrait of a woman whose broad education, impeccable manners, and backbone of steel carried her through a life replete with travails and triumphs. Not content with taking on art at 72, she took her 7-year-old great-niece in at age 78 and gave her the same vibrant education her own father and aunt had given her, not sending the girl up to the nursery, but keeping her by her side in good company and daily life. Although the end of that life was in company with no less than the royal family, King George III and Queen Charlotte having gifted her a cottage at Windsor and a stipend to allow her to keep up her London home, informally adopting her to such an extent that the Queen and princesses would sometime arrive with no notice. Quite a ways from the day in 1715 when her Aunt Stanley rescued Mary and her sister from being sent off to the Tower of London with the rest of their family, after their uncle was caught conspiring against King George I. Highly recommended to those who enjoy history, heroines who prevail through a distinct sense of self with quiet aplomb, and enjoy the painstaking creation of something simply for the joy it brings. That so much survives to be known of the lady who demurred from seeking attention is both a testament to her talents and the esteem in which she was held by family and friends. The Lady and Her Monsters, a tale of dissections, real-life Dr. Frankensteins, and the creation of Mary Shelley's masterpiece by Roseanne Montijo. Montijo focuses on the science, melodrama, and macabre realities of the era in which Mary Shelley lived. It is an uncomfortable, often gruesome read, all the more so because it is not fictional. The court cases, the experiments and crimes, the sordid details, all are cited, though often dramatized. The many and complex relationships, overarching melancholy common in so many of the main characters, the research, and its often unethically sourced materials. Montillo draws the myriad threads together by Mary Shelley's life, learning, and writing. Read this if you love horror movies, true crimes, and historical drama. Montillo is unstinting in examining what influenced Mary Shelley before and after her first novel, and what went into shaping it. But you might want to make sure there's no storms coming in and keep the lights on. There's plenty of nightmare fuel, which makes it all the more marvelous that Frankenstein offers so much more than it might have. Consider rereading it after The Lady and Her Monsters. You'll certainly have a different view. The Reason for the Darkness of the Night, Edgar Allan Poe and the Forging of American Science by John Tresh. Poe, like Mary Shelley, was fascinated with science. Being a man, he had far more academic avenues open and pursued them, but also steeped himself in all sorts of theories and papers. The notion of a hollow earth drove Poe's first novel and showed his dedication to the composition as a whole and the layout of even the opening pages. That the man was capable of flights of fancy and precisely planned and pointed writing is evident from his continued fame. That he battled alcoholism is likewise widely documented. He was both celebrated and reviled by his peers, depending on his sobriety and written and verbal criticisms and satire of others, some of whom never forgave him. Yet here the author focuses on the theories and academic influences that inspired Poe, the course of the author's life, and the deliberate vilification of Poe by Rufus Griswold after Poe's death, including a memoir that was largely falsified. The final chapter looks at some of the ways Poe's writings anticipated or inspired later authors and scientists. Our final book is The Planter of Modern Life, Louis Bromfield and the Seeds of a Food Revolution by Stephen Heyman. Though somewhat obscure today, Bromfield was a successful writer in his day, winning the Pulitzer and having books printed in multiple languages, plays on Broadway, socializing with the luminaries of his day, and engaging in personal and political activism. This is not ignored. The book relishes the way these accomplishments and connections enabled Bromfield's later endeavors, but its focus is on his conservationism and consideration of how we produce our food. Malabar Farm, which he created in 1939, was once described as the best-known farm in America and is now an Ohio State park. He grew up on a farm and even spent a semester at Cornell studying agriculture before family financial issues forced him to return home. Despite his efforts, a year later, they had to sell the farm, but he never forgot the joy that working the land brought him. Many years later, the movie adaptation of his India-set bestseller novel, The Rains Came, inspired by his time in Baroda, now Vadodara, was an Oscar winner for its special effects and the 5th highest grossing movie of 1939, which gave him the funds to create Malabar Farm. It was less than 15 miles from where he'd grown up and next door to where he'd camped as a child. Expansive and enhanced by the many things he'd learned over the years and continued to absorb, Bromfield's farm led him to make organic farming the niche, expensive produce it is today, and to crusade against the invading forces of DDT and Dutch elm disease. This wraps up our initial slate of books. Again, if you'd like us to email you a newsletter listing all of them, just let us know. To place the book on hold, you can call us at 847-259-6050. Email us at askrmlreference@rmlib.org or go to our website at www.rmlib.org. Click RML account login and place a hold yourself. If you have difficulties with the PIN, try the last 4 digits of your phone number or leave the field blank if you haven't set it up before. You can also, if you've linked your email to our system, click Forgot PIN and reset it yourself. Bonus, your library card number and PIN are also used to access many of our digital resources from home. This is only a small selection of the many new books we add to the collection on a regular basis, with an even greater number on the shelves from past years. Come in and check them out. The reference desk is staffed during all of our open hours, and we'd be happy to help you find something to read, watch, or listen to. In keeping with our truly great theme, there are nonfiction DVDs, audiobooks, and large type books available in the East Wing, as well as the books and kits in the West Wing. We can hold items for you at the checkout desk if you call or email us ahead of time, if you'd prefer a quick pickup over browsing. We hope to offer more truly great reads in the future, so keep an eye on the library newsletter, which comes out quarterly and is published on our website. Thank you so much for coming.